Now, before we get into these other two stories, is a story that we have posted up on Facebook this morning about how the Navy is attempting their first unmanned carrier landing for a fighter jet-sized drone, unmanned aircraft. And they're calling this thing the X-48B, and they state in the article that it will never be put into operational use. But we've spent over $1.5 billion to build them, and I'm not quite sure what their purpose is other than to act as a test mechanism to take off and land on carriers. But the real challenge here, and the real question here, I guess, is, by employing fighter jet drones, and this thing is huge. It's the size of a fighter jet. It's fully armed. Their goal, of course, is to be able to not have to get permission from other nations to fly drones by taking off from their airfields on their territorial land. So you could pull up in the ocean next to them, fly your drones off the deck of your aircraft carrier, and you don't have to get their permission. I mean, an imperialistic mentality, if ever I've heard of one, right? Is that really our job and our business and our role as a national leader or a global leader? I hardly think so. But perhaps the biggest irony here is, fighter-sized drone jets landing and taking off on aircraft carriers, and just the fact that they exist. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, do we really need fighter jet-sized drones armed to the teeth? And how long will it be before they're patrolling American skies? I tell you, every day there's a whole nother level of treason and tyranny that seems to come out of this state and federal governments. I'm just stunned and amazed that America is not just absolutely screaming in response. It never ceases to amaze me. I'm befuddled, I guess. I can't understand why America will not stand up and take notice of what's happening to our nation. Is everyone not aware of what's going on? George Washington made a very, very telling statement. The marvel of all history is the patience with which men and women submit to burdens unnecessarily placed upon them by their governments. I'll read that to you again, and I want you to think about it. The marvel of all history is the patience with which men and women submit to burdens unnecessarily placed upon them by their governments. So, what are the burdens that are placed upon you? I'll tell you the biggest burden and the thing that I think bothers me the most. And it's directly related to a quote from Thomas Jefferson, who was friends with Washington and a future president after Washington's term was up. And he sums it up in a fairly eloquent quote, which I'll probably mangle. But when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. And I got to ask you, and I want you to just think about a few things today that make you fearful, and recognize that fear for what it is, truly. Because I know, you're kind of anesthetized to it because you feel it so often now that you live in a constant state of fear. And so what happens is you don't really recognize it for what it is, and you're not alerted to it. It's like living with pain so long that you finally begin to internalize it and you don't even recognize it's there. But think about it. You fear the IRS. Everyone does. I mean, everyone fears the IRS. You fear when you look in your rearview mirror and you see a law enforcement vehicle behind you. Don't you? Is that really what our nation is about? You fear the NSA monitoring your telephone calls. Have you changed your habits? Have you changed the tone or the tenor of your conversations since that news came out? Have you changed the word that you would have ordinarily used in an email? Have you changed your passwords? Doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not saying they can't get in without your password. They don't need it. Really. You see, the point is this. We live in a constant state of fear. Obama is weighing an expanded gun database by demanding that states report the names of people who are involuntarily committed to a mental hospital so that NICS background checks can pick that stuff up and then they can deny them purchase rights. I say again, anytime you have infringed the Second Amendment, you are violating the Constitution. There is no prohibition at all, anywhere, period, that government can place on the ownership of firearms. I know you'll sit out there and say, well, wait a second, you got to be able to keep those crazies from buying a gun. No, you don't. With all due respect to that way of thinking, you're making a serious mistake. You're making a mistake when you believe that it's your right to determine, or someone else's right to determine who and when and under what circumstances someone can purchase a firearm. You have to understand something. And Nixon was guilty of this when he vetoed the Second Amendment Preservation Act. In fact, I wrote an article about it. It's on America's Voice now. How Missouri's Governor Jay Nixon doesn't understand our Constitution. You see, Nixon outlined two specific reasons for the rejection. Both were horribly inaccurate. For a guy who was one time the Attorney General for the state of Missouri, one would normally surmise that he might be more familiar with constitutional law. He's based his argument on the flawed premise that, one, the federal government can use the supremacy clause to enforce unconstitutional law and mandates in the states, I mean. And then the second issue is that the courts, including the Supreme Court, are the supreme and final arbiters of the Constitution. Neither of those positions could be further from the truth, and it relates directly to firearms ownership. The Supremacy Clause says that the Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, blah, blah, blah. He fails to read the clause in its correct context. Which shall be made in pursuance thereof, which directly relates to the passage of law by the federal government. It requires laws must be made in pursuance of the Constitution, not in violation of the Constitution. And in Black's Law Dictionary, shall not be infringed, the word shall always means must, and it's an imperative order. Infringed is defined as a trespass or encroachment, and is always considered a violation, especially when used to describe the invasion of rights. That's from Black's Law Dictionary. Therefore, shall not be infringed means that no law can be made that will encroach, limit, trespass upon the rights of people to keep and bear arms. All laws that limit the Second Amendment, whether passed by a state government or a federal government or a national government are null, void, and of no effect. Some people would argue that the various laws might be passed to limit firearms ownership by criminals, mental health risks, and other such limitations. However, it's important to note that once compromise is allowed in the manner of the way that you define words, it is always expanded to annex more and more risks underneath the umbrella, ultimately covering every, quote, undesirable thing, which is always based on the subjectivity of whomever is making those rules. The end result is always tyranny, since the rule makers always operate out of the color of self-interest. Suddenly, you're an undesirable, or some activity you've had in your life makes you an undesirable. But undesirable to whom? We'll be back in just a minute.
The media is destroying itself on all fronts. It's on fire. But that's why this is called the blaze. It's a purifying fire. Stand in the flames of the truth. It will purify. And what is real will stand. What is not will burn itself out. We're happy to pick up the smoldering pieces and dust them off after they've been purified and put them all back together.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Weekdays from 2 to 5, it's Glenn Beck on the Ozarks' best news talk, 107.1.
The Battery Station in West Plains is your headquarters for getting and being prepared. Natural disasters, civil unrest, personal and family protection, long-term sustenance, and most importantly, peace of mind. Berkey bottles and home-sized water purification systems, survival food, MREs, freeze-dried food, survival knives, lanterns, ammunition, military sleep system, and of course, batteries of all shapes and sizes. Take charge of your own survival and security. The Battery Station, 303 Washington in West Plains, 417-257-7799 or batterystation.com.
Have you heard? Proactive is America's top acne system because it's fast and gentle, and it's all about prevention. So stay tuned for a chance to participate in a 60-day trial to prove it. Do you have troubled skin, acne? With Proactive, you can heal your acne and help prevent new breakouts. Right now, in this radio area, we're looking for just 50 people with moderate acne to demonstrate exactly how fast Proactive works. The first 50 callers who qualify can try Proactive risk-free for 60 days. And you get our dermatologist's clear skin or it's free guarantee. Plus, the trial includes our legendary refining mask and green tea moisturizer free. Be one of the 50 lucky people to complete this 60-day risk-free trial. You won't see this offer in stores or on TV. It's a radio exclusive. Supplies are limited, and the trial offer ends soon. So call now. 1-800-575-9206. That's 1-800-575-9206. 1-800-575-9206.
Speaking of firearms and Second Amendment, and by the way, I really wanted to touch on this thing about Obamacare's expansion of the mental health records, and that's why we're addressing this thing, because this is part of it. But I want you to make sure that you have an opportunity to get your concealed carry license. And you got to give a call to Greg McLaughlin over at blackopsschoolofcombat.com. That's blackopsschoolofcombat.com. Give Greg a call at 255-1612, and he'll get you set up with a class. He's got them down there for $75 a person. It's an 8-hour course. He's got pistols if you don't have one. And he's got classes that run on the weekends, run during the week. And he can split a class for you evenings if you need to. And then in addition to that, if you bring 5 other people with you, your class is free, which is a pretty good deal. But, you see, you wouldn't say that free speech is a right except by those who may have spoken negatively before, or perhaps even lied under oath and perjured themselves. You don't go around and say, well, somebody who's perjured themselves once before in court we revoke their free speech rights, would you? Would you say that someone who's mentally unbalanced can be forcibly silenced from their opinion? I don't think so. But the argument is that the government can limit, by infringement, the rules of people to own and possess weapons, and that's anathema to the principle of the rule of law in a nation based upon principles of liberty. No law that limits firearms ownership or possession can be tolerated. You know why? Simply because to do so invalidates the entire structure of the Constitution and all the other binding clauses that are part of it, that are made in pursuance of the Constitution. And it renders the entire document void. In fact, any law that infringes on firearms can't be made in pursuance of the Constitution simply because the Constitution itself strictly forbids it. And that ought to tell you everything you need to know. Jefferson, in question of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. There's those who will put forth an opposing argument that want to twist the Constitution using the principles of verbicide. Our founders couldn't possibly have known about machine guns. They couldn't have known that someone might have a weapon that could fire 1,000 rounds. Or, this is the good one. So does that mean everybody ought to be able to own a Sherman tank or an F-15 fighter jet? Yes. Yes. You see, the absurdity of the argument is exposed immediately when you ask the same question where it pertains to the First Amendment. Did the founders envision television, the internet, that iPhone you carry on your hip, or the 24-hour propaganda of the Ministry of Propaganda, promulgated and promoted by channels like MSNBC? Of course they didn't. Yet those same people who will throw that argument out there would be the first ones to scream and yell at the top of their lungs if you attempted to limit their free speech based on the type of equipment they use to deliver that message. If you want to really think about it, television is a high-capacity, rapid-fire, fully automatic assault weapon in the hands of the Ministry of Propaganda. Hadn't thought of it that way before, did you? Free speech, in all of its forms, just like firearms, were left to the unrestrained use and possession of the people, specifically to thwart tyranny in government. For no other reason, people. Limiting one always ends up with the undesirable consequence that government can act in a manner that is against the best interest of the people whom it was created to protect. George Washington said, "Government is not reason, it is not eloquence. It is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master." This nation was built on a serious level of cynicism and healthy distrust for government. Because like all governments, this one historically has shown itself to always lean towards usurpation. Started in 1798, in 1796 actually, when they passed the Alien and Sedition Act. Sedition, for throwing the president under the bus, passed by John Adams, one of the founders. Tell me you can't be corrupted. Left to its own device, government is always dangerous to liberty and freedom. It is inevitable that all governments become tyrannical. And allowing the Second Amendment to be infringed in any way, shape, or form is a series of giant leaps in that direction. Go ahead, caller. These guys are hammering these phone lines. Go ahead, folks.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, quickly, I got the phones jammed.
Okay, if people go to your Facebook page, they'll find a list of legislators. Tim Jones, Speaker of the House, the Senate President Pro Tem.
Right.
These are the people we have to call.
To override the governor's veto on 436 Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Yes, they will not do it unless we call and demand it.
I agree.
Okay.
So, folks, make sure that you get over to our Facebook page. I'll put this up on the web, too.
Okay.
Later on this morning, but
I'll make my calls this morning. Everybody else needs to do the same.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right, appreciate you. Go ahead, caller.
Yes.
Go ahead,
Michael,
caller.
Hello, Michael.
Yeah, you're on the air.
Yeah, you'd quoted George Washington and other, but there's a more recent precedent. Mao Zedong says that all true power comes from the barrel of a gun, out of his little red book.
There you go.
So, it's come from both sides of the agenda.
Right. That is the truth.
Okay.
Hey,
Bye,
thank
sir.
you. You know, the concept here, guys, is that any legislative act that is contrary to the Constitution cannot be valid. To deny this would be to affirm that the deputy is greater than his principal, that the servant is above his master, that the representatives of the people are superior to the people themselves, that men acting by virtue of powers may do not only what their powers do not authorize, but specifically what they forbid. You know who that was? Alexander Hamilton. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello?
Yes.
Yes. I just like to... Michael?
Yes.
Yeah, Michael?
Yes. Please, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. Michael, would you please give me just 30 seconds of... for I can like to express my opinion. You're very good about speech. You speak of wisdom, but I'm going to tell you what the problem is. It's good to have a radio station. It's good to have it be on a computer, but you need to get that station on a TV so people can see you. They can hear you 1 hour a day, each day, and then you can also have a radio station, and then you will really get the whole country going, because this is what we need somebody like you, not like O'Reilly or them other people. We need somebody like you on a TV, and I'm ready to go ahead and support you financially, whatever, get other people here in Arkansas, get them going, go to the door, another door, get a pamphlets, whatever, get you going, and get you 1 hour on a TV station, 1 hour. That's what you need every day, and then you can also use your radio station.
I thank you, and I appreciate your confidence in me. I think that's probably we are working on, and so thank you for that call, because let me answer that point.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We are working on a project, which I started to bring out to you guys yesterday, and that is to create a website channel where you'll be able to listen to not only AVN, but also a number of other hosts that we will handpick who are also of like mind and sentiment in this patriotic mission. And so that is something that you can support. It won't quite be television. I don't have a face for television. I have a face for radio. And so it's a good thing most of you can't see me, because I'm not a very handsome guy. And the issue here is, in order to be on television, that means you've got to be, you've got to have a lot of support and sponsorship, and you've got to have a television station that's willing to put you on. Listen, I got to tell you, I don't think any of the mainstream media is going to let me go down television and talk the way I talk and tell the truth that I tell and call it the way it is. They're just not. You know why? Because they have a vested interest in keeping a guy like me shut down. And that's the truth. The only way that this is going to grow is by you folks helping it to grow, by sharing it with your friends, sharing this program with your family, your churches, your VFW hall buddies, the people at work. You've got to help me spread the word, because I'm going to tell you, if you're waiting for some white horse to ride up and salvage this show and make it national, you're kidding yourself. It ain't going to happen. Not without your support. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
We are the Ozarks' best news talk, KBMV Birch Tree.
Fox News Radio, I'm Dave Anthony. A double defeat for the defense, trying to argue self-defense at George Zimmerman's murder trial. Fox News Radio's Evan Brown, live outside the court in Sanford, Florida.
Now, Dave, George Zimmerman's attorneys won't be allowed to fully use an avatar-style computer-generated recreation of what they say happened the night Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin.
The computer animation will not be introduced into evidence, but it may be used by the defense as a demonstrative exhibit.
Meaning the jury won't be watching it while deliberating. Also, Trayvon Martin's text messages and cell pics are again ruled inadmissible. The judge previously said there's no way to prove Martin actually sent them himself, Dave.
Eben, the House holds a hearing this hour into Obamacare.
The key issue in front of us is the fairness of postponing this major mandate on businesses, but not postponing it on families and individuals.
Texas Republican Kevin Brady, the White House does not want to delay that particular mandate that individuals have health insurance, saying Obamacare provides key financial assistance to low-income Americans. A spiritual leader is a wanted man in Egypt.
The head of the Muslim Brotherhood, along with 9 other leaders of the Islamist group, now have arrest warrants out for them. They are being